not just Arizona State fans, but any college football fans who know the big players are familiar with Brandon Aiyuk and Eno Benjamin in particular. So we'll focus on Brandon Aiyuk. I hear news coming out about him almost every few days about another team being interested in him, and him being a very interesting prospect coming off 65 catches and 8 touchdowns last year. So what are your thoughts about Aiyuk's projection to the NFL? Also could help some teams in the return game as well. And just what you're hearing about his prospectus.
Well, he could go anywhere from the first to the third round. The thing with this draft, it's really deep in wide receivers. Maybe in any other given year, he's a given first-round draft pick. But maybe this year, maybe he is second round just because there are a plethora of really, really good wide receivers in this draft. But he did recently have surgery for a core muscle injury. I think that happened last week. He decided to do it and get it out of the way because obviously nobody's going to training camp or practicing anytime soon. So he decided to get that out of the way. So who knows how that will affect anything, but I'm looking for him probably to go late first round, middle second round is what most of the projections are.
Of course, Eno Benjamin had a monster season as a sophomore in 2018 with 1,600 plus yards, 5.5 per carry, and 16 touchdowns on the ground, 2 through the air, caught another 42 balls. So he's got that element of his game with 77 catches over the last 2 years that you like to see projected to the NFL, where they like to utilize the backs out of the backfield as pass receivers a little bit more than college running backs at certain programs. So what have you heard about Mr. Eno Benjamin?
Well, with him, you're probably looking at a middle round draft, probably somewhere from the 3rd to the 5th. He worked really hard last year on his pass catching and route running. That was his biggest point of emphasis. I think he knew after his sophomore year he wanted to give it one more year and then come out. So he really, really worked on that facet of his game. His production, if you look at the numbers, dropped off a little bit last year, but that was more the product of the offensive line in front of him. They had some issues up front, and that really, really made it hard for Eno to get some running room. So I think that's the reason, and Coach Herm Edwards kind of emphasized that all season long, that it wasn't an Eno problem, that Eno was Eno. It just was a matter of the players around him. The one area of concern with him last year, he tended to have some issues with ball security, and that was something he didn't have a problem with the first 2 years at ASU. So hard to tell where that stems from, but he did have a few more fumbles than what they would have liked. But Eno's the type of runner, you need to put him in space. He probably needs to be in a spread offense. He's really hard to tackle one-on-one. He's the yardage after the contact is unbelievable. Run over people, and I think that's his biggest attribute.
Eno Benjamin running a 4.57 at the Indianapolis NFL Scouting Combine in February, which is not blazing speed, but it's certainly, there are, and I saw a graphic during the Scouting Combine that I'm glad that the NFL Network ran, where they showed the top 5 to 6 most productive receivers in the NFL over the last 5 or 6 years, guys like Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, those kind of guys. None of them were the blazing speed 4.28, 4.35 guys. Certainly speed is huge. Football's all about speed to a certain extent, but you got to have the skills, toughness, and football acumen to play on the field and know what's going on. Got Cole Cabral, an offensive lineman who was an all Pac-12 second team selection 2 years ago. Interesting about him is that he's been a left tackle center combo guy with 25 straight starts for the Sun Devils.
Well, with Cole, I think it's going to be interesting to see where Cole goes this year, because he came back came in for his senior year when he could have left last year, and some people say he should have left last year. But his thing was he started at ASU as a left tackle, and he only moved to center last year as a junior. So part of the reason he came back was he had only played center for 1 year, and he wanted to learn that position. And then lo and behold, they had some issues on the offensive line last year, and he ended up back at left tackle for a couple games. And then that was a disaster for the rest of the line, so they moved him back to center for the third game. And again, he started on an offensive line with 2 true freshmen, and one of the 2 true freshmen that started with him was a 17-year-old true freshman. So he had a lot on his shoulders as far as trying to hold the line together. And the consensus here is he didn't have as good a year last year as he did the previous year. So I think it's really going to be interesting to see where he goes. Probably you're looking like a 7th or an 8th round, or a late round draft for him.
And to your point, Michelle, as I mentioned, second team All Pac-12 2 years ago. Honorable mention, didn't make first, second, or third team of this past season. Kobe Williams in the defensive secondary, pretty productive player that's been on the field a lot for Arizona State his sophomore through senior seasons with 36 games played, 6.5 tackles for loss, couple interceptions over the course of his career, not just last season, over the course of his career. But now we get into that place where guys are just trying to make NFL camps, might be a free agent selection where he's trying to find the right fit, the right place where he might be able to make a team.
He's just definitely a really interesting kid. I mean, he's small. He's 5'9", 5'10". That's really, really small for a corner when you're talking going up against receivers nowadays that are 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". I mean, that's a tough pill to swallow for Kobe. But, he doesn't pass the eye test. But all he does is go out there and he gets the job done. And if you look at the number of receptions he gave up, he wasn't targeted much because they knew he was a lockdown corner. So you look at what he didn't give up very much last year. And he's kind of been one of these guys that always played with a chip on his shoulder. He had to go to junior college because he had no offers. He played on a Long Beach Poly team with, a ton of future NFL guys and major college guys, and he was the overlooked guy. So he's kind of played with that chip on his shoulder, and I think it's really helped him.
I was just scrambling to check out the numbers from Michael Turk, the punter. He's at a 46-yard average on 67 punts. I don't know where that ranks yet. I will look this up nationally, but it's got to be extremely high because there's not a whole lot of guys averaging 46 yards per punt.
No, he ranked 11th in the country.
Okay.
11th in the country, but the other number, if you look at the number of kicks he had, I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head, but I think he had more than half of his kicks he nailed inside the 22. So that's an unbelievable number. So not only does he have the distance, but more than half of his kicks he's landed inside the 20, which is another phenomenal statistic. The biggest problem with him is he tended to outkick his coverage. I mean, it was unbelievable how he outkicked his coverage. And then the other thing, if this is an astounding number, he did 25 bench press reps at the combine. He's a punter. He out bench pressed offensive linemen. He bench pressed 25 times, 225 pounds, which is obscene to me.
So we'll be looking out for Michael Turk on the coverage units as well. Once he punts it, that he might be headed downfield looking for somebody to knock down.
No, he's unbelievable. And he's only really been punting for a few years. He really didn't start punting until like very, very late, in high school. So, punter's a weird thing. You never know how many teams are looking for them. So we'll see what happens. But I think he's definitely a quality get for somebody.